Hi, it's Dennis Daly. One of my most fun assignments was interviewing Matt Roloff. Now, you may have seen him on a variety of reality shows. Matt's a little guy, and his wife is a little gal, and his family, well, the children are both average size and little people. Matt is an interesting, wonderful, funny man. I interviewed him at his home in Portland, Oregon, the yard of which has been turned into an amusement park. I asked him if he thought he would have been as successful had he been born normal height.
I think I would have done a lot of it. I don't think I would have gotten away with as much as I do get away with. Being a little person does create a certain dynamics with relating with other people that has allowed me to, maybe carry my personality a little further than I might have been able to get away with. That's kind of hard to explain, but there's some advantages to being a little person. I think I'm fully aware of those, and I've taken advantage of those to the best of my ability, but I think I would have done a lot of this. Maybe not to some of the extent, but certainly most of it.
I remember interviewing Billy Barty one time, and he said the only bad thing to him was when women came up and treated you like a little kid. He said he got so tired of people saying, "Oh, you're so cute."
Well, Billy Barty, I love him to death. He founded, if it wasn't for him, I never would have met my wife, Amy. He founded our organization in 1957, and God bless him for that.
He fell recently, Yes,
he did. He fell just the other day.
And I've talked to him since.
Oh, you have?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Oh, really? Oh, great. Okay, well, Billy has actually got a little endorsement on my book, and he just loved him. I've known him forever.
Let me ask you this. You say that's how you met your wife. Not that a dwarf, a midget, a little person would need to marry someone who's also short. There are a lot of what you might call mixed marriages.
Right.
But what is it like to want to find someone like yourself?
Well, when you have such an obvious difference, such as being little, it really narrows the field. I mean, that's, so you're thinking it's hard enough to find a woman that's compatible with your values and with your, your socially and just in a number of different ways, but then to also add in the fact that you want somebody that's under 4 foot tall, it becomes a real needle in the haystack. I personally always said I will marry whoever I fall in love with, tall, short, and I dated a fair amount of average-sized women all through school and on beyond, but I kind of had in the back of my mind to be more equally yoked. Marriages are so tough, there's so much work, they're so difficult to keep together, and to make it just a little bit easier, I felt to have some of my own height would maybe take away a lot of the other additional issues that I didn't need to deal with.
Is there a concern about having children? I mean, not that they're going to be little people. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But are there medical problems without getting too specific into this?
Big time. Let me see if I can give you. First off, let me say, most dwarf couples that get married are same type of dwarf called achondroplasia like Amy is, and they have a tremendous death rate. I think it's 25%, but I actually think it's higher than that.
You mean among the children mortality rate?
Yes, they're called double dominance, and the baby's born, and a couple of days later, the baby usually dies. We know so many couples that have gone through pregnancies and births and have lost their children, and it's a tragic thing in our little people, and they're doing some research to try and understand how to work around this. But
by the way, this is so cute. 2 of your kids are out there, and the older one's leading the little boy.
Holding hands, isn't that?
Yeah, that's a perfect brother and sister.
Yeah, they're quite friends. The 2 younger ones, they're all really good friends. We're really blessed with kids that are really not only...
You have 4?
We have 4. We have the older twin boys. One's average size, one's little, and there's a lot of interesting dynamics going on there. And then we have Molly, who's 5, and then Jacob, who's 2. And because the older boys are off to school, these 2 have become quite close, and so they're quite friends roaming the farm in the morning.
So of your 4 children, 3 are going to be average size?
Yes, and 1 is going to be a little person. And so with Amy and I being a little person, that's a family of 6. That's actually 3 of us are little and 3 of us are going to be tall. So when we get ready to remodel our kitchen here, we're trying to decide whether to go high or low on the counters, depending on how much we want the kids to do.
Last night, we went around the farm, the estate, if you will, of Matt Roloff, a little guy barely 4 feet tall, who's written a wonderful book called Against Tall Odds. In his backyard is an indescribable playground of things for little people and kids alike to do. 6'2", and I at 5'7", had no problem scooting through some of the tunnels. I just did not want to leave. Right now, we're driving around Matt's farm talking about what it's like to be a midget, a dwarf, a little person, to endure all the razzing and all of the discrimination. I asked Matt what it was like growing up, because kids have to, they have to make fun of anyone who seems to be the least bit different. It's just part of adolescence.
I would say it's more challenging mentally growing up with different, because you have constantly got to make sure that your head is screwed on straight. You've got to constantly, you can't overanalyze situations, but you can't do things like be offended easy. If somebody calls me a midget when I was a little kid, if I spent energy being offended by some word, where does that get me? Do I win or do I lose? Okay? I have to win by not being offended. I'm not going to be able to stop that person, but I have to win by not letting that have energy, taking energy away from me. I have to use that energy to go off and do something else good that makes me feel good. But I absolutely, I grew up calling my brother, who's also a little person, I called him Midge, because I wanted him to hear it all the time, because I felt like that would take the sting away. And to this day, and this is mentioned in our book, to this day, when somebody calls me a name, I don't feel the slightest little bit of sting about calling me, other than some personal insult that's, off in another direction. But being little, I know I'm little. My dad used to say, I come home from school, hey, Dad, somebody called me little at school. And Dad would say, boy, that guy's got a good set of eyeballs, doesn't he? And
now, were your parents average size?
Yes, average size. And
genetically, you were talking about double dominance here. When a little person marries a little person, things happen. Mm-hmm. Was there dwarfism back in the family genetically, or was this a big surprise to your folks?
Oh, it was a tremendous surprise. My dad was the big, brawling Marine type guy, and my mother was an athlete and very, they had the perfect thing going, physically, and they thought they were going to have a wonderful. Can you imagine this? We had my sister, who's older, 16 months older than me. She's perfect, a specimen, as my mom calls her, just 5'11", and then when they had me, it was just, surprise. And then to have my other two brothers who also have medical problems, it really was a downhill slide for them for those years.
Well, to me, the really awful thing that happened is they wouldn't let your mother see you after you were born.
Right. Isn't that terrible? Because back then in the 61, they didn't know what to say. They knew probably that I was some sort of a dwarfism. Maybe they had seen it, but they needed to bring in more experts and consult. And in those days, instead of showing to the mother, they're afraid that the mother might, freak out, and they want to wait till she's more stabilized. And so there's a different approach to the medical community, certainly back then than there is today.
Well, now, let me just for a second continue one area, and that's the whole area of adversity. I see your book, which, by the way, has a wonderful title, Against Tall Odds, as being something that anybody who feels different or feels that they have a reason to think that they're maybe less than others should read, because I really think there's a lesson in this for all of us.
Attitude in life is everything. You get one life, as far as I know, and you need to make the most of it, regardless of the circumstances that you're put in, regardless of, the fact that you were, beat as a child or whatever they might be, to pick yourself up by your bootstraps the best you can, get your head on straight, understand who you are, what's your purpose in life, why you're here, and then go out and make the most of your talents and skills. Understanding your talents, understanding your skills, focusing on those, developing them, that's critical. Anybody, I believe, I have seen people way worse than me that can't talk, speak, do anything for themselves in a wheelchair, that are happy as clams. They're just happy to be alive and to have a life and to be doing what they're doing, contributing, whatever that might be. So, my dad used to always get so upset when he'd see some perfectly able-bodied guy feeling sorry for himself about one reason or another. It's like, okay, that's okay to do and feel bad from time to time, but don't dwell on it. Get over it. Go out and focus on it. I tell people more often than anything, get away from the television set. Don't spend your whole night watching TV all night, and go out there and do something productive. Join a social group, or go out and get into some kind of a hobby or a model, or build your skills for work, or do something to make something of your life.
The other day, I went to the grocery, and I have chronic back trouble, and I'm kind of thinking, why do I have a bad back? I said, well, my dad had a bad back. And then I walk in, and I see this guy in an electric wheelchair, and I realize he doesn't have any legs. Then I realize, wait a minute, this man doesn't have any arms. And he was operating the wheelchair with a little lever on this, probably a thalidomide baby, if listeners know it,
right.
Had maybe a vestigial hand or something over there, I couldn't tell. And I'm thinking, how is he shopping? Well, I guess it was his wife was with him, but he and this woman are just laughing and yucking it up and everything. And I'm thinking, my God, what I have is nothing. And yet he's out there and he's in a good mood and I'm a grouch.
Absolutely. I mean, everybody has a choice. I believe this. You have a choice. You get put in a circumstance and you have a choice. And you might have to reach deep down into your mental capacity to decide what you're going to do, which way you're going to go. But everybody has choices, and where you end up is the culmination of all those little choices put together. Each action. What am I going to do this morning? What am I going to do? How am I going to respond to this? Am I going to be positive or going to be negative? Believe me, I've had my times of depression and down, and I've had my ups and my downs and my times when I wasn't proud of did things that my actions where I wasn't proud of. But for the most part, you have a choice on how you're going to lead your life, and you need to make the most of it.
It was interesting. We were driving around Matt's farm, which he has turned into a miniature Disneyland, talking about discrimination, about how people are different. And I mentioned to Matt that in the 24 hours I had known him, I almost forgot he was short. That we were sitting and talking, and except when he got up and had to use crutches and was obviously shorter than I, that it suddenly occurred to me that he was indeed a little person. But after I got to know him, that really became immaterial.
Great. And I my sister used to say that to us young. People used to say, what's it like growing up with three little people for brothers? And she'd kind of shake her head like, oh yeah, that's right, they're little people. And she used to tell us, people say that, and I just can forget that you're little. And now, of course, I've heard that all my life from friends and what have you. So there is something to be, you get to know somebody.
In some cultures, and I being Irish, I think of leprechauns, isn't there some fascination with people who are short? I mean, isn't there culturally a lot of interesting traditions with that?
Yep, absolutely. And it's historically there's been a lot of interesting traditions and the court gestures back in the early days, and even today it's still, there's a mystical nature about little people. I don't know why, I guess I can understand it, but I think I'm kind of out there to change some of that. I participated in some movies when some roles that weren't particularly flattering to little people, but at the same time I think I'm doing my piece to prove to the world that little people can be professionals and they can be lead wonderfully productive lives. One of my big messages is to the parents that are out there right now that are average size, and the least thing they expect is to have a baby that's a dwarf. They didn't pick it up on the ultrasound, and boom, all of a sudden here's an average couple with the perfect little life. He's got a wonderful job and she's wonderful house. They maybe have a couple. Suddenly they have a little person, boom, and they're thinking, we've got a midget. That is a very scary thing. I just had a kid that's a midget. That's like a creature coming out of me. That's bizarre. And that's your initial reaction. It is incredibly intense. But my message to those parents is just plow ahead and think about all what a wonderful contribution that person can make to society and all the other people. There's a lot of us around that are examples of that, and I would not trade my little peopleness, if you want to call it that.
That's a good phrase. I like that. My little peepiality.
Yeah, my little peepiality. But my little peopleness, I wouldn't trade it for anything, because it has been so many advantages and gifts in life that I've led a much more exciting life that's directly tied to being a little people. And if I wasn't a little people, I wouldn't have had near the excitement that I've had. So
I wouldn't be interviewing you.
You wouldn't be interviewing me. I probably,
you wouldn't have written the book.
Yeah, I'd like to think I built some of this farm, but it certainly probably wouldn't be quite as interesting to the average person.
Your children, for example, are they old enough that they can verbalize the feelings they have about having two parents who are little? I mean, are they getting any flack at school? Have they ever sat down and talked to you about this?
We ask them about it all the time. It's a great question. I love trying to analyze this, and I want you to talk to see what you could get. But certainly, I asked Molly just the other day.
Now, she's how old?
Now, she's 5, okay? And I had her out the other day for a little one-on-one, and we went to Red Robin for a meal. And I asked her, I said, Molly, are you proud of your dad even though he's a little people, And she had a big smile and she shook her head yes. I said, why? She goes, I don't know, but you're a great dad. And that warmed my heart. And I said, are you embarrassed, Molly, that daddy's a little people sometimes is embarrassing? She's not yet. But one of these days I'm sure we'll embarrass her and it'll be hard. I think the older boys, we're in sort of a unique situation because for my boys, all the kids that are in their class, they think that Jeremy and Zachary's dad is the cat's meow, because when these kids come out, I'm in the game with them. I'm hiding, seeking, and chasing them and hitting them with paintballs and everything
you're
else.
their size.
I'm their size.
Or you're smaller than they are.
Yeah, and I've created a world that they can enjoy. So Jeremy and Zachary are very much, there won't be any other kids that have an opportunity to be embarrassed or ashamed, I don't think. But certainly there are some challenges. Certainly we're in for some tough days as they go into teenagers. I got to be honest, I'm a little nervous. I don't think I'm nervous about anything, but I'm a little nervous about the prospect of walking my daughter when she gets married down the aisle, father and son. Here I am, you want to have a certain care, be able to carry yourself down the aisle. Here I'm stumbling. I'll be wondering how I can even hold her hand, as I walk down the aisle. So these are some of the things that you do think of, but I don't certainly dwell on them. I'm going to cross that bridge, but I want Molly to be proud of me, and like any father would have that concern, is my daughter, proud of me on her wedding day when she's walking down the aisle. So the key is with your kids is to every day you're raising them. Every single day you're planting in them the moral values, the seeds of success, and the things that they need to take their life and go on. And I think we're being a wonderful example to our kids of how adversity, don't let attitude. If my kids complain about anything, they're in big trouble.
I wanted to know about the difficulty, though, of women who are of small stature getting pregnant. There must be some really strong medical concerns.
Yes, it's a big concern because they don't have the space, and usually the doctors will take it very seriously and put them in the category of high risk, even though there's no other reason than the fact that they're little and they're going to be carrying an 8-pound, 7-pound baby. We've been very, very fortunate because when Amy had the twins, that was really alarming to the doc, got the medical community, at attention, and they were very, very interested in it and following her case. But they did put her on bed rest earlier, even though Amy's just absolutely strong and athletic and very capable. But they put her on bed rest earlier because they wanted to be sure that she didn't move around. But with little people, women, they always have cesarean, or at least all the cases we know have cesarean because it's to the pelvic area. That's a difficult thing. But a lot of little people have healthy babies and normal births, and it's good.
We mentioned Billy Barty a couple times here. If someone doesn't know, he's an actor. He's been in a lot of movies and probably, as you say, had to play roles that were rather demeaning sometimes to eat. But he founded, he set up a foundation, which is in the Burbank area, North Hollywood, I think. It's called the Billy Barty Foundation, isn't it?
Yes.
And tell us what he has done for guys like you.
Billy's biggest contribution, bar none for me, has been the founding of the Little People. Now, the question comes, well, if Billy hadn't founded it with somebody else, probably, but they didn't. And Billy founded it back in 1957, started getting people together for the national. This organization is one of the most outstanding. People ought to be doing research on this organization because we are self-help. We're not funded by outside government agencies or anything yet. We're very self-help. We've gotten the medical community, very involved. We have a whole medical staff, board that gets all the doctors around the world that have special interest in little people or belong to this. Now, Billy spun off some time ago, he spun off the Billy Barty Foundation to do some additional fundraising. He does the Billy Barty Golf Tournament, raises money. The kinds of things he's done for me personally is one time when our family made a trip to Disneyland, we were able to call up the Billy Barty Foundation, and he had these little electric scooters that he loaned us for no charge. He loaned us a scooter that I was able to use to get around Disney World or Disneyland down in L.A. He does a number of other activities. I'm not familiar with all of his activities, but certainly I'm grateful to Billy for his vision and foresight to get the little people around and to use his actor status to help pull it together in a relatively short order back in 57.
I can't remember the name of the actor, but he played in The Wizard of Oz with the Lollipop Guild. Do you remember whom I'm thinking of?
Oh, is it Jerry? Maybe that was Jerry Marin.
Marin, yes. He said that when he was brought to Hollywood to be what were called the Fisher Midgets, that they put this group together to be in The Wizard of Oz.
Now, the Little People organization was originally I think it was going to be the Midgets of America. And they quickly moved that. I don't know why. It's probably more catchy. Maybe midget wouldn't be a bad word if we would have stuck with that.
But he said in an interview that he had never met another little person before. He'd never seen a little female before. And for him, and this was many, many years ago, 1939, that at that time, so many little people lived in complete isolation, no one to talk to, no one to share, no information about it, that I can see, how that organization was needed for a long time.
Absolutely, and it has there's some statistics that float around, and I can't really back a lot of them up, but there's some statistics floating around about the suicide rate with little people, and one of the members of LPA corrected me recently and said, Matt, that suicide rate doesn't apply to people that have been in the little people organization. There has been a high suicide rate with the little people, a lot of depression, people that have a lot of struggles. I mean, kids in school are brutal, to little people, and unless you know how to turn that around and use that to your advantage and to counter that, it can be very demeaning and it can be hard on a guy's ego.
Matt, thanks for bringing us up here to Portland. I can safely say I have not had this much fun in a long time.
Great. Well, I'm glad. Well, that's what the place is. You were quite the little kid out there last night running around on all this stuff and up at the top of the barn, and we couldn't get you down, so.
Thanks a lot.
You bet. Thank you.
It is a great name for a book, Against Tall Odds. I'm Dennis Daly.